trickling in. We will give it a few minutes just to give some people extra time to click in.
I see Colin is on the attendee list, or is among the attendees already?
Yes, I think so.
Good.
Very nice. The numbers are just climbing up. Great. We'll give it a few more seconds before we dive in. Great. Okay, let's get started. So welcome everyone who is here. Thank you for attending today. You will notice that a poll might have just popped up. And if you could answer it, that would be fantastic. I can see a few people are already starting to answer, which is great. And we'll have a few polls throughout the webinar. So whenever they do pop up, we encourage you to engage in them. Great. Okay. So like I said, for everyone still joining, welcome to our webinar. Our webinar is Candidate Experience in Practice, using insights to build a strong recruitment process. And today we will be talking about going from measuring candidate NPS to driving impactful results, as well as getting the entire hiring team on board to build a great candidate experience, and real life tips and examples of projects that have helped Charles and Etienne with successful hiring. And at the end, you will have an opportunity to have your questions answered. And with that said, throughout, please just feel free to drop your questions within the chat. And at the end, we will address them. So great. I'm thrilled to share that we have two really exceptional TA thought leaders and experts in the candidate experience space with us here today. So I'll now hand it over to them to introduce themselves before we dive into our discussion. And thank you both for being here, and thank you everyone who's here today live. So Charlie, will you start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Janelle. Great to meet everyone. Well, I can't see anyone. I see people popping into the chat, so I assume there's a good number of people. So it's great to be here and talk to you. My name's Charlie. I look after talent acquisition at a company called LGC. We are a life sciences company, about just under 4,000 colleagues globally, mostly distributed across North America, UK and Ireland, and predominantly in Germany as well. Been here just over 2 years, and a huge fan of the Talent Hub Starred platform. So yeah, looking forward to talking more about candidate experience and what we've done and what we've learned as well.
Thank you, Charlie. Etienne, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I'm Etienne. I'm part of the TA Excellence team at Doctolib, based in Paris. So for those who might not know, Doctolib is a health tech company. We provide various software services for care teams and patients. And I have the pleasure to be working on two topics, mainly like recruiting coordination. So I manage a team of recruiting coordinators within our global TA team, and I also take care of several excellence topics, including candidate experience. And so I'm I would say the start guy at Doctolib, and I really like that job actually, and I'm really glad to be discussing more about how we can leverage candidate experience as TA professionals.
Thank you, Etienne. Matthias, would you mind briefly introducing yourself as well?
Yes, I'm sorry for being a bit late here. My name is Matthias, Senior Director Talent at Emnify. Yeah, we are a Series B IoT deep tech startup from Berlin, Germany, but hiring globally, have a team in the US and Latin America. And for me, candidate experience very close to my heart, because that's the value creation that we deliver from a talent perspective. And that's why I'm happy to join the panel today and share some insights.
Great. Thank you, Matthias, and thank you all for introducing yourself. We now have quite a few poll results in, and the question is, do you have a way to measure candidate NPS? And we have 58% that have said, yes, it's great. 10% says we're looking for a better, and 30% say not yet. So that's interesting. If you've just joined, please answer the poll questions throughout if you would like, and ask your questions within the chat and we will address them at the end. Great. Without further ado, let's dive into the discussion. So our first question is more around why it's important and why now. So we're focusing on demystifying candidate experience today. And so why is it important for you, and why did you decide to prioritize it when you did? Etienne, would you like to start?
Yeah. Initially, when we started to, first of all, like something maybe really important to start is to say that, like, I think every TA professional, I don't think any recruiter is like naturally like not caring about candidate experience. I think everyone cares about candidate experience. Every recruiter in this world wants to be very benevolent toward their candidates. So when we talk about like measuring candidate experience and investing into candidate experience, I don't think we always start from scratch. There's always good initiatives in any company to try to build good candidate experience, no matter what. At Doctolib, when we wanted to invest more in candidate experience, and so first of all, to measure it, it was really because we had no way to look at it from a consistent perspective. We often had recruiters having some kind of like debrief calls with hired candidates to get their sentiment on the process. Some candidates during rejection calls, they were also sharing their impressions on the hiring process, what worked well from their perspective, what could be improved, but it was not consistent. And I think like the initial rationale behind like implementing any kind of NPS is really when you want to have like this consistent vision on your candidate experience, this consistent way to measure it.
And would you both mind speaking to that as well in terms of why it's important and why now when you started?
Sorry, sure. My signal cut out minutes ago then. But yeah, I think building what Etienne was saying as well. I think, and I absolutely agree. I think, you know, candidate experience, it's, if you're in recruitment, and we're preaching to the converted on this call. Obviously, everyone on the call has an interest or you want to learn more and know more about candidate experience. But I think fundamentally, if you're in recruitment talent, you're a people person to a degree, and no one intentionally goes out their way to give candidates a bad experience. And to Etienne's point, you know, typically in my role, usually I hear about escalations where things have gone wrong, as people often do. Right, that's a, you know, a key point. People often talk about what hasn't gone well. Well, you know, had a bad experience or a bad impression on X, Y, and Z, and you'll get the occasional pat on the back, what's gone well, on the whole. And then you've got this big gap of in between, where you don't really get any feedback. So I might say they might have had a slight niggle, but it's not enough to warrant a, you know, an escalation or an email, etc. They may just think, push it under the carpet and carry on. So I think, and again, I've always come from a point of data, and just naturally my view is always to look at data, contextualize it after, absolutely, but, you know, come from a place of data as a starting point for discussion. And so straight away, we think about the candidate experience, and we think about what that means, not just as a concept because it's good and we, you know, it's the right thing to do. Candidates, you know, they've invested time, and so, you know, we should be giving at least reciprocal feedback based on the, you know, the efforts and intentions of the individual. But then actually think about how it can, you know, build out our brand, how it can be a tool and an engine for hiring, ultimately, fundamentally making more hires, good hires, better hires as well. And that's when we started to take, you know, put a greater lens on it. And so all of a sudden we think, well, let's just, rather than talking about it, let's look at, you know, leveraging a system that allows us to capture really clean and objective data from candidates at the various stages of the recruitment life cycle. Because again, to Etienne's point, you speak to hired candidates, you're usually going to get people that are pretty happy with the outcome and the experience. But all of a sudden then capturing those candidates who were maybe rejected post-interview, the ones who are typically maybe a bit burnt, if you like, from not getting the role, really hearing their feedback, etc. They're the people that we wanted to see. We want those people to be the biggest brand advocates. And so, yeah, we looked at that about a year and a bit ago. And as my account manager Gert will attest to, I'm pretty in the weeds on a daily or weekly basis. And since then, it's been a priority ever since.
And when you first started measuring candidate NPS, was there anything that struck you or that was really surprising about the feedback that you received, whether it was really positive, really negative, or kind of in that neutral ground?
For me, it was, yes, it was. I was pleasantly surprised. I think, in all honesty, because you always go in there with, and again, like I said, we're a fairly large organisation with thousands of applications every week, hundreds of interviews taking place every week. So there's an awful lot of data going in there, and so you go live, and again, I was almost like an addict looking at the data initially, just seeing what's coming through, etc. Look at the trends, but over time, you start to see actually. Yes, and I think it kind of answered what my assumptions were, which is as a recruitment function, I'm very lucky to have an exceptionally talented group of people who do genuinely care. What it did highlight was quite clearly is that some things are out of our control, and how can we address that? I.e., maybe less objective feedback being obtained by hiring managers or interviews, etc. So you can work backwards, and I can talk about that a bit later. But on the whole, was really pleased with what we were seeing, and it allowed us then just to really turn the dial on focusing on tweaking certain things with candidates and ultimately about communication as well.
Matthias, do you have a specific example of something that surprised you when you first started measuring candidate NPS?
Yes, I think it's super hard to create a candidate experience for every candidate in the funnel, like even the one that we don't interview, right? For particularly the top funnel. Because I do think that in my career so far, I have seen a lot of people focusing only on the ones that we hire, which is great. Then ideally the ones that we interview and have touch points with, but not so many people actually really value the top funnel candidates, right? When I apply, and applying these days is very seamless, right? It goes very fast. What can I expect? Yeah. And expectation management here is about feedback, response. And then what I keep on seeing is that candidates these days, they want, even without being invited for an interview, still a very solid reason on why they are rejected on the CV screening stage. And that is, of course, to a certain extent not scalable, right? You cannot give everyone feedback, especially when you have cases where you have thousands and thousands of applications, what is possible, what not, right? So this is one thing that is super hard to fix, I believe. There are ways, but that will change a little bit your experience dramatically. And then also, of course, for me, it was very important that hiring managers understand people who are interacting in interviews on daily basis, that they have a responsibility, and that what they do in those interviews have impact in the overall experience. And I sometimes believe that people don't think as far ahead of this. Yeah, they'd be like, oh, I had a great interview, oh, I had less time to prepare for this interview, and then they say something, even if, let's say, they have good intentions, right? They really want to master this, but they create harm because of this, because they don't know better. And somebody needs to explain and share them this feedback in order to create learning opportunities for hiring managers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe if I can, and it kind of linking back to what Matthias just said, obviously, as I said earlier, I don't think anyone engaged in the recruiting process has bad intention, and so that's why it's very important, because I think every interviewer, even people outside of recruiting, like hiring managers or technical interviewers, they want to be better at this, because it's often something they value a lot in their job. And I think like the NPS is kind of the right approach to it, because if you really want to focus on the level of impact that you have as a TA team, it's kind of a good thing to mimic what is done within business. And so if you're just running like just a satisfaction rating where you're just asking people out of 10, how satisfied are you with the recruiting process, and you just make the average out of it, it's not reflecting the behavior that they will or not recommend your company to other talents. And in the end, it's kind of beyond just the fact that everyone wants to do good as an interviewer, to do good as a recruiter. It's also about the positive impact you have, or negative impact sometimes you have on your employer brand, and how much you build an employer brand in the mind of candidates when you interact with them. So it's I think it's also one of the main rationale for implementing that kind of thing.
Yeah. So what were some of the biggest changes that you made to the recruitment process based on that candidate feedback? And what results have you seen based on those changes?
Who wants to go?
Matthias, you jump on, Matthias, and I can put you back on the back.
Yeah.
Of your
So look, what helped me a lot, which was obvious to me, but sometimes hard to implement, is when you talk to candidates in interviews, and you have really touch points with them, proper interviews. I think for me, it's important, if people take time to speak with us, we need to take time to give them feedback. And I don't mean writing an email and a standard template. I get on a call, I organize, even if it's just 5 minutes, and run them through, hey, this is what was great, this is what was not a fit for us at this stage right now, but look into this or that area in order to be better in the next interview that you have according to this, right? And this goes a long way, because if people are learning from the interviews and the interactions that you have with different companies, then they become stronger, they become better, right? And I think for us, we have seen that such a initiative, even if it's sometimes hard for a recruiter that says, oh, I have actually more feedback calls than interviews, or they're in the same way, right? This is a caveat, but on the other end, it goes a long way, right? So we keep on seeing results like somebody is rejected but refers another candidate to us for the same role, right? Such behavior, such like kind of how do you say, network effects, I would always say, is something that creates then this very tempting opportunity to really get the right people for the team. But people are treated well, right? And we talk about always the good experience. Also keep in mind that the bad experience travels faster than the good experience, meaning that actually to make a case with candidate experience, you need to calculate this, and there are formulas out there that can calculate the potential risk in money, in terms of money that you burn because of a bad reputation on the market. And I think these are completely different aspects of how you can navigate this conversation as well. But we were staying at the data points, and here giving feedback helped a lot. But also another thing that helped us a lot is rewriting our templates, our interactions, right? How we interact with candidates, how we prepare them, what do we send out? Do we have a candidate portal as well that preps them on our interview process? Can we maybe even create the career page a little bit different to understand what they are looking for? So these are things that helped us a lot.
And I think as well, building on your, from LGC's perspective, we're very similar sort of mentality, and for us, it forced us to be far more structured and provide far more structure with how we approach interviewing, because fundamentally what candidates, I believe, look for is just clarity of what they're going to be doing, who, with, and when, and so they can best prepare in a thoughtful way to give the best, essentially to give the best presentation of themselves possible. And from a recruiting perspective, we want to be setting them up for success equally as, from a recruiting process perspective, making sure that we are assessing the candidate thoroughly and fairly as well. And so it's forced us to be very, very structured with how we look to create interview processes. We're structured around our touch points with candidates as well. We're very clear with how we communicate with candidates, straight from the application. The email confirmation that candidates get, we make it very clear as to when we're going to be getting back to them by a certain point. And from there on, we don't schedule interviews within a certain time period from when the interview is due to take place, when it's scheduled, to allow for enough time for the candidate to prepare, even though there might be pressure and focus, on hiring managers to put people in straight away, same day, next day, etc. You think about, take a step back and you think, well, what about the candidate here as well? And the candidate may be willing, or at least appear willing, to go and cram in an interview as quickly as possible, but really, are we setting them up for success? And that it just forces us to be far more structured in that. And so it allows us to be, lay down some foundations, of which now we can start to build on and tweak. But yeah, it's been very impactful with, by looking at the data and just working backwards through the data and making changes to our process globally as well.
As you've grown more comfortable with that data and creating actionability from it, have you noticed that, or have you noticed any correlation between improvements in your candidate NPS and then your internal metrics, such as time to hire or quality of hire, et cetera?
So I think I mentioned before, I find I don't like time to hire as a metric of KPI. I think it can be, if you make a quick hire, doesn't mean it's a good hire. And typically you'll make the same hire twice in a 12-month period. The quality of hire is an important one. Stickiness, what we call it. So you look at tenure times performance. And yes, fundamentally there is a correlation between candidates who have a positive experience throughout the interview process. And we also look at that on hiring managers as well. So happy hiring managers, happy engaged candidates equals more productive and higher performing employees. And that, I think there's various reasons for that. One, I talk about momentum, and most people in recruitment will talk about momentum building throughout candidate process, making sure that we have a clear, structured process, clear communication, timely communication, regular communication, all the way from application right the way through to day one and beyond. That's really important as well. So yeah, for us, it was when we look at the data and we start to look at candidate quality. Absolutely, there's a correlation between recruiters, etc., who are delivering a great candidate experience, relating to recruiters making great hires.
Matthias, you looked very passionate about that as well. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I think we're highly double down on or agree on this structure is key, right? We also have seen sometimes the intention by hiring managers to create such a great experience that they forgot about actually assessing candidates. They just pitching, talking, and you'd be like, well, fantastic. And then in the end of the day, how do you like the candidate? Well, I think he's great, or she is great, right? Or the candidate is great. And then you'd be like, okay, but how much talk time did the candidate have? Well, 5%. Well, how do you know that this person is great? Well, he's a great listener. Okay, active listening skills. Check. Well, I think, there's really a lot in there, but structure is key 100%, because in order to get proper data, right? I cannot imagine the endless times that we talk also with vendors like Start about what are the workflows, where do you get the data from, how do you master this, which survey then happens where and when, right? To not also over survey people and avoid mistakes. And I think there is this is a real almost information architecture job, right? To really nail this a bit, because so many people always say, oh, there's just one score on candidate experience. No, there's so much more, and there is so much opportunity to really get proper data and leverage this data in the best potential way to for your organization. Yeah, so I think I can only second that. The more you get into the data weeds, it's then really how do we understand what is really broken or not. At the same time, we should also do not overwhelm stakeholders with too much data, right? So many times we have so many data points on our hands that we say, look, we can measure this, and then somebody like an executive is be like, wait a minute, what is the problem again, right? So I think, you know, we also need to be mindful a little bit with stakeholders to not overwhelm them, because most of them are not used to work with candidate experience data for sure not, but also with talent data in general, talent acquisition data already. That is overwhelming.
Yeah, so when they're not used to working with it, or they could be overwhelmed by the volume of data, what strategies have you found that are effective in getting your stakeholders, such as hiring managers or the recruiting team at large, on board with acting on those candidate insights?
That's it. Do you want to take that, and I'll
Yeah.
build on.
Yeah, I think the very first thing is to define ownership. So from my point of view, because my situation is special, I'm part of an excellence team. So I'm kind of working for the TA teams and being their point of contact on the candidate experience topic, to tool them and help their reflection. But really, like, setting ownership and responsibilities toward the usage of that data is really important. So you can have someone like me as a matter expert there to like set automated reports, to push metrics to people and try to nourish their reflection. But if and then you need to size it to your proper TA team. So I don't know if it's something that should lie at the level of the hiring manager, or if it should be directly managed by the recruiter themselves or whatever. But like, you need to set expectations for people to leverage this data in their business reviews. So we asked, for example, our TA managers to include the candidate NPS in the recruiting metrics they present to the business. They present to their hiring managers or to their business leaders. We asked them to set action plans based on those metrics. We included the candidate NPS in the performance assessment of our TA teams. Those are things that drive ownership. And I do realize it because like before we decided to include the candidate NPS as part of the TA assessment, not to say that the engagement of the TA team was lower, but definitely when you make it part of the assessment, when you set expectations and you set the ownership, saying that, hey, looking at the data, getting conclusions out of the data, and getting an action plans on top of those conclusions is your job, people, they really tend to do it. Why? If it's just a data that is provided, a data point that is provided as part of an overall dashboard, and there is no real commitment that goes with it, it's often people, they don't action it. And linked to what we just said, they tend to get lost also with it, because they don't have like with ownership comes the need to be an expert of that data point and to really understand it and know how to analyze it and how to drive conclusions out of it.
I was gonna, +1 to.
Oh no, Charlie, I think you paused a little. Was that just for me?
What you said?
Yeah.
No, for me as well. Yeah.
He's reconnecting.
Yeah.
We can. Matthias, do you wanna speak to it quickly before? Oh no, we're back, Charlie. Great.
Yeah.
No, so I got my internet.
You said +1.
Yeah, I managed to get out my positivity for Etienne's.
The internet couldn't handle it, so.
It couldn't, but it kicked me out and logged me back in. So yeah, with exactly the same. So we've had the exact same view, that we wanted to weave in candidate experience, high manager experience into performance, because fundamentally agree. You know, we have, I think, about between 50 to 60% of performance rating is weighted on candidate and high manager experience. So it is the biggest chunk of performance weighting for individual recruiters. And I guess the reason why is because of the behaviors that it drives as well. You know, I'm fundamentally, if your stakeholders are happy, we can probably make assumptions, right, that they're always being filled in a timely manner with high quality pool of candidates, being relevant for the role. So all these other things that we are assuming are offshoots, if you like, of having good high manager experience scores. And similarly with candidates as well. If your candidates are happy, both people that are rejected after interview as well as, the low hanging fruit in hired candidates, etc., you're going to assume that you're communicating regularly to your candidates. You're giving them thorough, tangible feedback where appropriate and needed. And so that's why we've leveraged more on candidate and hiring manager experience score, more so than the typical, how fast are you filling your role, what's your time to hire, etc. What's the cost of hire, agency usage, all of these other things. We're far more weighted on those, simply because of the behaviors that we are going to assume that it drives. And to Etienne's point, we've also looked to weave this into business reporting. So our board pack, which gets sent to the board, the private equity company, etc., the CEO, C-suite of the group, see our candidate experience and hire manager experience scores month to month and also over time, so we can start to see the trend as well. So yeah, we are weaving it into just BAU daily conversations to try and make it as normalizing the conversation as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned reporting it to the board. Have any of you also experienced that unlocking this data around candidate experience has altered the perception and the value that the TA team brings to the business?
Yes, I think for me, it's really important that when you measure candidate experience, and it is one of your key KPIs, then you need to report this to the management, of course, right? Don't hide it. Don't make it too much data, right? Also very much like see this and say, look, here's our candidate experience score overall, and these are the departments that are higher, and here how it differs, and that's pretty much it. But I have seen something, and that's maybe also a little bit of a different take. We talk about business and TA, but is maybe to my panel here, are people actually also?
Oh, Matthias, lost you.
Yeah, he's going to get the boot as well, like I did, and come back in.
I'm sure it'll take just.
Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah. So are people actually measuring the performance of their recruiting team also on candidate experience? Because I do think that, when you really mean it like this and also make a KPI, a candidate experience, a main KPI for the business to see how is it going, do you then also do this for the recruiter and hold them accountable instead of saying, these are the amount of hires you need to make? You say, no, I do not care so much about the amount of hires. What I do care about is the experience that you create in your interactions with candidates. And I don't think that I have seen so many recruitment teams actually doing this. Yeah, I got even challenged very hard on my team saying, you're the first leader that I had, and that's somebody who's very experienced individual contributor, said, you're the first leader that holds me accountable for candidate experience, even on my performance reviews, right? And I think that's a question maybe for us also as leaders to drive this accordingly.
So we have our final question that I'll ask, if you can all speak to it. So for companies that are just getting started or maybe rethinking their approach to measuring candidate experience or NPS, what's one key insight or piece of advice that you would offer to help get them started?
Etienne, do you want to?
No, after you this time.
Okay. So for us, I think one, again, I don't want to sound like a stuck record. It's normalizing the conversation around candidate experience and hiring manager experience, right? So if you start to normalize that, and to Matthias' point there as well about encouraging managers to really see the benefit of it, and so then you get essentially, rather than it just being top down from the recruitment leaders to their TA team as to, hey, this is important. I find it important. This is why I find it important. So hopefully you also find it important as well. Also, if you've got that same level of focus from hiring managers and leaders as well, really focusing on candidate experience in the NPS, then you're inevitably going to win, because there's focus from all angles there to make this a key factor, if you like, on performance and delivery. So for me, it's normalizing the conversation around candidate experience being a priority. And then from that, working backwards with the view of data, which again, using the STAR platform being fundamental to what we've been able to do, but leveraging data and being able to work backwards to then provide tweaks, changes, etc., from a point of fact rather than an assumption. So that's what I would say. That's what works. That's what works for LGC. I think it's a pretty good starting point.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Etienne.
From my perspective, if you want to start measuring candidate experience and set up a candidate NPS, first of all, open comments. Really, it's pretty tempting when you design your first candidate experience survey to want to include rating questions on everything possible and have 15 different matrix within your survey. No, open comments are the most valuable resources because you get the real verbatim from candidates and they are really actionable. If you look at the NPS on a daily basis, you get crazy because it goes up and down until it's stabilized. So open comments is something you can look at on a regular basis without becoming crazy. Second is reflect on your approach to feedback, on your feedback culture, because the very first thing that I had to do when I presented the very first results we collected to the TA teams was to do a huge disclaimer about hey, don't take any of these personally. Those are candidate feedbacks. We need to put them into perspective. Candidates are also biased to some extent. That's normal. But really, setting up that kind of thing is a good test for the feedback culture in your organization. So before launching anything, have a good thought about how you deliver feedback, usually within your recruiting team, between recruiters and hiring managers, or between recruiters and their managers themselves.
Yeah, you're so right, Etienne. You can't improve what you don't measure, but you also need to change that feedback culture around your measurements. And yeah, also the tidbit of having those open questions also helps drive the narrative behind the quantitative feedback. Super cool. Thank you. Matthias?
Yeah, for organizations that do not measure candidate experience and just get started, the big question is always why do we need to invest in tooling to measure this properly, right? Or is the existing tooling not measuring it? And I think for me, in order to put money behind it, it's building this rational or this ratio of why do we need great candidate experience? What is the potential cost of bad candidate experience? And then I did, for example, a lunch and learn with about candidate experience in our organization. And what happened was really funny. After they understood the consequences of bad candidate experience, they were submitting their scorecards much faster. It's obvious things like that, where they'd be oh, once I realized this, every time I interview somebody, I'm really making sure I hit the deadline of 24 hours, right? And sometimes it's this storytelling approach that you as a leader need to do in order to say, let's connect the dots and make sure and explain this and show also data points, right? Because START and other vendors as well, they have a lot of data out there that you can download, white papers to measure the impact on how to get started and why you need it. And then you can start building your case internally to say, look, I think, honestly, especially when we hire more people and a lot of people, and this is key, we need to master this. Otherwise, we will set up for failure.
Yeah. Well, I have so many follow-up questions, but we are running a little out of time and bleeding into the Q&A session. We have a poll, if you haven't noticed that it popped up. And the question is, what's stopping you from measuring NPS today? And we have the options: lack of budget, not a priority, lack of internal buy-in, already measured NPS, and other, right in the chat. So we're going to ask or answer a few questions from the chat. So if you haven't already asked them, please take to the chat and ask them now. Great. Let's just weed through this chat quickly. Great. I agree that personalized feedback is a standard to improve NPS, but with the volume of applicants growing due to AI and bot applications, the time needed is increasing significantly. What ideas are there regarding the internal value spend, regarding the time needed to service this? I think, Matthias, you spoke to that a bit.
Yeah, I can take this. Look, totally agree. This is the challenge. And what I always argue here is a foundation of creating great candidate experience is to manage your funnel properly. Meaning, you don't need for one role more than 10 to 15 or 20 active candidates maximum. Yeah, I see a lot of people, they don't screen properly. They have like, I don't know, 30 people in the talent interview stage, 15 people in the department stage. Then you have another step or the final stage, another 10. And then you have like 40 or 50 people times 15 or 20 roles that you manage. No wonder you fail in candidate experience, because that's almost impossible to keep up with everyone, right? So it really starts to be, okay, who do I have in my funnel and how do I do this? And by step, making sure that you have 10 to 15 candidates per stage in order to do this, and also explain maybe the business to say, look, this is so key these days. The market is so complex. I cannot take 30 roles at the same time. I want to deliver great candidate experience, and that means I am only delivering on 5, 6, 7, or 10 roles max, right? So get into the capacity planning on this, or what it means to deliver a top-class, world-class candidate experience, by also saying that takes time, right? And that needs to be somehow then reconsidered in capacity planning and leadership as well, to say, if I want to set up my people for success, 6 to 7 roles, that's pretty much it. And then really manage the funnel better. And then you have the opportunity and time to have less people on active candidates, and then more time to give them proper feedback.
Plus one on this one. We have some recruiters at Doctolib who are really trying to implement that, or who are very selective in the candidates they want to bring from recruiter screen to business interviews. And really, it changes everything from a time matrix perspective, because then they can allow themselves to spend way more time on feedback delivery for candidates, and more customization in feedback and things like that. So it makes sense to, if you bring too much candidate in the pipe, obviously you can't answer in a personalized way everyone. So it's also about it's a good way to reflect on your own TA efficiency and your selection criteria.
And Tracy asked, in your opinion, when is the best moment to send the MPS? And also, what are the 2 key questions to ask?
Oh, that's the 2 key question ones. That's a real tough question. So for and I think I've alluded to this a few times for LGC anyway. Whilst hired candidates' feedback is important for sure, and it's always good to get the perspective of a person who was successful in the process and their feedback. Etienne says you might see this as well. Typically, these are the biggest promoters that we have, and you'd hope so as well, seeing as they're joining the company, right? For me, I get most value out of looking at the feedback from people who are rejected after interview. They are typically the people whom you really do want to be brand advocates, because these are people who will go away having not secured a role at the company, may talk within certain circles with peers, former colleagues, current colleagues, etc. And they'll be the people that you want to be advocating for your brand and having a positive experience. And so that's the demographic of candidate that I am mostly interested in improving the candidate experience, and they're typically the biggest detractors from any process. So that's the area that I would absolutely, that would be a hard commitment for me if I were to be starting again and rebuilding this. That would be the stage that I would be looking to focus on. In terms of the questions, so again, it depends on, and I think to Etienne's point before about you want to be driving comments for sure, because yes, the numbers are helpful. Are you a promoter? Are you not? If you're not, why not? Because otherwise it's very difficult for you to look at any objective actions from that. So I think you want to be having, I'd say, less questions is important for sure. You don't want to be bombarding. Etienne's absolutely spot on. For us, we look at questions around, do you feel like you were given enough opportunity to be successful within the interview. So then we're measuring the interview effectiveness as well. Do they feel like they were given a chance to perform suitably and to demonstrate their skills, etc.? So I'd say that's a good question, the interview piece. You can link that to being prepared for the interview, and just the quality of the interview as well, because then you can start to look at actions on maybe interviewer training, structure, etc. as well. So again, you can probably see the mindset that we have at LGC, which is largely the questions, the answers expected from those. What would they drive? How will we be able to action things internally? Don't think it answers your question, the two key questions, because there's so many that you could look at. It depends on maybe what you're initially going to be focusing on, what you want to try and look at, and that may change over time as well as you start to become more mature, perhaps with your candidate experience offering.
We are a minute past, but I can't thank you all enough for joining and providing your insights and your experience and your wealth of knowledge. And everyone who's joined, thank you for your questions and your participation. I didn't really speak to the last poll, but it seems as though 43% are already measuring NPS, which is fantastic. Yeah, and if you're curious about how START can help you strengthen your recruitment process, you can also book a free call and can see that in the corner. But thank you all so much for your time, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. We will follow up with an email in the next few weeks answering the remaining questions that weren't answered, as well as the recording of this webinar.